My name is Nichelle Curtis-McQueen, and I'm with the National Association of Social Workers, Washington Chapter, Legislative Action Committee. Today, it's my honor to be hosting this amazing interview with former Representative Eric Pettigrew and our student representative on the board for BSW students, Ernesto Cabrera. Eric was a representative from 2003 to 2021, recently retiring, and represented the 37th District in Seattle. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ernesto, who's going to be leading our conversation.
Thank you, Nichelle. Eric, thank you so much for being here.
Very honored. Thank you for having me.
Also, congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you very much. It's technically a retirement, but I don't think you ever stop being a legislator.
That's a good thing. So starting out with some questions. What made you want to become a social worker?
I grew up in South Central Los Angeles back in the mid 60s. And as a kid, I witnessed firsthand the Watts riots. Those are one of the very first riots in Watts and South Central LA. And I saw my community go from being a thriving community to being a place that was really difficult to raise children and to really have a community thrive. So I think starting there, it started my journey to wanting to do things better for individuals and for community. And I vowed from that moment on, whether consciously or unconsciously, that would be my mission in life.
So prior to becoming a state representative, what areas of social work were you practicing?
I was I started off, I got my bachelor's from Oregon State University in sociology, and I got my master's from University of Washington, and my MSW from University of Washington. And so some of the first jobs I had was working for Odessa Brown Children's Clinic. I also worked as a child protection service worker, which is probably the hardest job I ever had. And prior to that, I did some work at a juvenile detention center in Oregon. But once I really discovered that direct service was harder than I thought it was going to be, I moved into the policy area and started working for the Alliance for Children, Youth, and Families, which is now known as the Children's Alliance. And from there started to just really try to play more of an active role in the policy development as it relates to children's issues and social worker issues. You know, having the perspective of being a child protection service worker and seeing the challenges and the difficulty, not only as a social worker, but really being a CPS worker in particular, and how difficult it was in interacting with families in the state and negotiating between all those with the court for the best interest of the child was incredibly difficult, but a great learning experience for me and helped me in my development as it relates to policy. So I started off kind of at the front line, and I give credit for all those folks who to this day, whether they're working with families or working specifically in child protection services, for their courageousness and their willingness to do this. So it's absolutely incredible.
So in the front lines of your career, is that when you decided to run for public office?
You know, actually, I decided to run for public office after saying to myself, you know what, I'm not making a lot of money in social work. I want to make some money. You know, I was a young family. I had a young son at the time, and I actually stepped into the corporate world working for a Safeco insurance company. And one of the things I realized, though, even in the corporation, was that there is definitely a need for social workers, at least a social work mentality or skill set. And so I was working at Safeco Insurance for a number of years, and the legislator that was actually in the position before me, he was also a social worker. His name was Kip Takuda, and he was a state representative at the time. And he came to me and he said, Eric, hey, I'm going to spend more time with my family. I think you'd be great at this, mainly because you are community focused and you're people focused. And I think you'd be great to take over for me. And so I was like, at first I was like, there's no way, Kip, I don't want to, there's no way I want to be a politician. I mean, I don't even know how to talk. I can't yell at people at the stop signs, when they cut me off, and I can't yell at my kids in the grocery store. I can't buy bottles of wine as much as I want to. And he said, hey man, this is not about you at all. This is about you giving back to a community that's given you so much. And this is about a community service. This is not you being a politician. It's not about you. And when he said that, it kind of took me aback a little bit. And I decided to do it. I decided to run based on that. And so I ran, and I had a very, very tough race against three very prominent opponents. And I was fortunate enough to win. And I still didn't really know how to be a politician, even after I got elected. And once I got elected, I was like, okay, now what do I do? How do I make deals and all that stuff, all the stuff you see on TV and all that stuff, and how you talk to Republicans? I don't know. I don't know if I've ever met a Republican, which I had. But I just said to myself, I'm just going to use the skills that I learned as a person and as a social worker, as far as being able to listen to folks, hear what they're saying, take in and cues that they were giving me about what it was that they were needing or were experiencing, and then try to do the same on the outward side. And it turned out to be very incredible for me as a legislator.
That's a uplifting story.
Thank you.
What did it mean to you when you were elected to the House of Representatives in 2002?
It was the most amazing feeling in the world. When people put their trust in you. We represent anywhere up to about 180,000 citizens in our districts across the state. And so when the majority of those folks put their trust in you, it actually means something when you go into the legislative floor and they swear you in. I can remember standing there and I like tearing up for the first time ever at the Pledge of Allegiance. I mean, we grow up just saying it, like, I pledge allegiance to the flag, blah, 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 singing the national anthem. And, it's like, it's just kind of what we do. But when you're given that responsibility and you're taking that oath, it was incredibly, surprisingly very emotional for me. And the same way when I took my very first vote on the floor, realizing that I was really representing the folks that had put their trust in me to do the best for them in this particular setting. And so, and then suddenly everything around me as it relates to government and policy, even statutes, suddenly meant something to me that, that I understood that at that moment, that really everything I was doing was all in paying tribute to the people I represent. So any building, the state legislature itself is really a tribute to the folks that it represents. Any statue, is all about the folks that we represent, and it had very little to do with me. One of the things that was pretty amazing that I experienced when I first got there is on the fourth floor of the legislature, and if you get a chance to go there, you should just tour around. There are pictures of every single legislator from the 1800s to today. And you start walking around and you start realizing, like, I don't know any of these people. Their pictures are they're faded out. Maybe at the time they were, the most popular, or they did some great things. But in reality, those pictures really don't really matter. It's really the work that they left behind to do for the people that they represented that really matters. It's not really about me. That was the discovery, that it wasn't about me, that it was about the people I served.
I'm sure you were really happy when you were elected that day.
I was incredibly happy, and I'll tell you why, because, and I still get emotional about this, is that my mother and my aunt came up from Los Angeles. We were a very, very humble beginning. We were very poor growing up. My mother was from Arkansas, and she got her high school education, but my grandfather got a second grade education. He's sharecropper. We were a family of sharecroppers, and I was only one of two of the first in my family to go to college. And so to have this moment and have my mother there was absolutely incredible to see her excitement and joy after witnessing, just kind of how far her family go, her parents and her grandparents and the struggles they put up with, to see that their son, even being born and raised in a really tough area of Los Angeles, to thrive. And so it was an incredible personal moment for me to have my mom there and give that to her, to say that was really it was about me as far as getting elected at the time, but it was really more about her and a tribute to her and to my family before me.
That's a good story. What notable experience or experiences have shaped your career as a state representative?
There are two that, actually three that stick out to me, that actually four, okay, there's a number of them that stick out to me, that really kind of helped me understand how to be effective in Olympia and what it meant to be a representative, and actually how personal it can be, sometimes, as far as your emotional feelings around policy issues. People, I think, look at politicians as being these kind of deal makers and these unconscious, unaware folks who are like, just doing stuff without doing anything that makes sense. It doesn't make any sense what they're doing. But in reality, it takes a lot of thought and a lot of strategy to get a lot of folks to vote your way. It's 147 people between the House and the Senate and the governor's mansion to get it, to make things happen. And I forgot your the original question and where I was going with that.
Your experiences that shaped your career as a state representative.
So there's four I can tell you about right off the bat. The very first one that I experienced was that there was a senator from Eastern Washington that was in the middle of negotiations around a healthcare bill, and in the middle of it, in his frustration, I wasn't there, but it was reported back to me, screamed out, "You're just being in the wood pile," and when I heard that, I was thrown back, and I went to my caucus and said, what are we going to do? And at the time, the caucus was like, well, he's old, he's going to retire, he's going to die off, so don't worry about that. This is old school. But it really bothered me that, here was my party, and I thought they would really rally around me and do that. But it taught me, one, that the legislature isn't necessarily a place that you can change consciousness, that's not really what it's all about. It's about votes and getting policy done and going forward from that. The second time was one that really moved me, which was I was trying to get food stamps for ex-felons. They had been eliminated from receiving food stamps. And so in my district, there's a lot of folks that come out of the prison system and come back to my neighborhood and need help in getting started. And so food stamps would be an excellent tool to help them do that. And so I presented a bill that would allow that. And when I went to my leadership, they were like, no way, this is all about soft on crime that the Republicans are going to come after us with. There's just no way you're going to do this. You can forget it. And I was like, well, this is the right thing to do. So I was pretty persistent, going back to the leadership. And they finally said, okay, fine. Here's this long list. They gave me this super long list of things. If you can do this, including getting these Republicans to vote for it and these Democrats not to vote for it, then we'll pass it. So I was like, fine, you're not telling me anything. I mean, hard work is nothing. And so I went through that entire list, and I went to the Republican Party and I asked them, I said, would you guys stand down on this? Would you not make this a big deal? They're sure if people can vote against it if they want, but just don't make it seem like it's, the end all of everything. And as a result, it passed with only 10 no votes. So there's a whole lot of Republicans that voted for the bill, including the folks in my party. And actually, of the 10 people that voted against it, there were people that were Democrats that had to vote against it. So that taught me that it's all about relationships. It's all about connecting with folks and being able to go to people reasonably, regardless of what their party or what it is that they may normally represent, and talk to them as individuals. Because I appealed to each one of those people and said, this is really important to me as it relates to my district. The third thing is I was trying to help with childcare. I was trying to, for our district, we have a lot of folks where the subsidies, state subsidies for childcare. They get a subsidy to help them pay the cost of childcare, and the rate is half of what it costs to actually provide childcare. And so, for the purposes of negotiating a reasonable rate every year, I suggested that we unionize. We work with SEIU, and that we, and I'm not saying I'm 100% a union guy or not a union guy, whatever it is, but in this particular case for childcare and for the people in our district, it was the best route to go. And so I pushed really hard. I mean, I was really emotionally engaged in this because it was blatantly one of those blatant issues that could really have a huge impact on poor families. And as a result, one of my Democratic colleagues in the Senate basically crushed it, really talked about how horrible this union is and this and that. They looked beyond the fact that this was going to actually help people. And it took me, once that was defeated, it took me, I'd say, all of the interim, which was about 6 months, before I actually emotionally got over that. I was really angry at him, and I was really angry about the process. It was so blatant. But eventually I got out of it, and it taught me a lesson that I can't always be totally emotional about these decisions, that I've got to be able to deal with it and then go back to that same senator at some point and ask him or her for their support in another bill. And if I carried that with me into those future conversations, I wasn't doing anything to help the people that I served. So that taught me a lot about, just move on, don't take it all too personally. The fourth thing was I took a stance on charter schools, which is very, very unpopular in the Democratic Party. But when you look at the district that I represent, a lot of the kids, a lot of the students in my district, there's a huge percentage that had been failing out of school, weren't performing or getting the instruction they needed. And it was, you heard of the achievement gap, and that was a part of the achievement gap. So I was suggesting that we look at some other alternatives to help in addition to the traditional system. And charters was just really, it was like, it was just the one issue that Democrats all rallied around and rallied against. And, but I did it anyway. And I got called a lot of names. There's a lot of assumptions made about my motivation behind it. Like I was trying to help out corporations, which made no sense to me, because I can yet find a corporation that says charter schools actually make money for them or something. I don't know. But it was all about the students. And people told me that, I would not be elected again, and I was not a Democrat. And I mean, it just really, just horrible things. Called me, they called me a dumb jock and all this and that stuff, just really trying to, and these are people in my own party. And I still withstood it and got reelected again and got a lot of support. And so that itself taught me about courage, that it's really about, it's not about myself. Nobody wants to be on the outside. If I had the choice to not be on the outside of that particular issue or any issue, I would. I mean, just it's human nature. But I knew that it was for the better of the students, to fight for them to have an alternative, to give them an opportunity to learn. So courage was the biggest thing I learned from that. So those are the four major pieces of legislation and incidents that really shaped my career and actually continue to shape me as a person.
How do you see social workers making an impact and advocating at the macro level?
Social workers have an incredible amount of power on two levels. One, they have the knowledge So they know firsthand what families and individuals are struggling with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you're going through it with them, and you're working with them on trying to identify the best next steps, or what helps to help them survive or thrive in some way. So you have that knowledge. The other is that you also have the knowledge of skill. You know, you have the ability to articulate what those issues are, and to be able to relay the actual direct emotion or the direct understanding of how difficult it is for these individuals and families. Most of the clients that social workers work with they can't advocate for themselves. And so it's really an incredible role that social workers as a large group and as individuals can play on behalf of their clients to change policy.
How has the social work practice supported your career and or work as a state representative?
It has been every skill I've used every single social work skill to be successful in my career, whether it's been in the corporate world or it's been in the political world. And again, those things are, you know, I was elected the caucus chair in my caucus. And so that's the third position in the House. So there's the Speaker of the House, there's the Majority Leader, and then there's the caucus chair. And my role as a caucus chair is really about taking care of the other legislators, the members. You know, I'm there, I'm kind of like a counselor that they can come to me, and when they have issues and problems with either things going on, with either other colleagues or even they're struggling themselves personally, or they have some personal issues going on at home. I was really the person that had the open door that they could come to me. If you come to my office, you'd see I'd have like water treatments and lamps, and there's booze in there, and there's, you know, couches and everything, places, food, where people could come and just kind of relax and share whatever thoughts they had. So yeah, it was my role to, and I lost the question because I started talking too much, but it's my role to really kind of be that person that people can reach out to and connect. And so my social work skills really were about listening, watching for cues, listening to cues, really hearing people, not just waiting for them to finish so I could say something else, but really hearing what they were saying, repeating it back to them just for clarity, you know, make sure I understood what it is that they're looking for. And even that would help them in understanding what it is that they were asking for or what they were struggling with. And also not being afraid to express kind of how my feelings were related to whatever was going on and my thoughts around that. So being open to that, which is really hard, I think, for most people to do that. So that's where I use all my social work skills.
Healthy communication.
Definitely.
What factors do you see influencing the social work macro practice in the future?
It really is social workers being more strategic on policy development. I really think that I know that there are a ton of issues that all social workers want to. Anytime sometimes when I run into social workers down Olympia, you know, there's just a whole list of things that they're like, and this and that. I mean, which are all definitely very legitimate, but it's really important for organizations like NASW to really hone in on 2 or 3 things per legislative session that can help move the ball for social workers or their clients as a whole every single year. It's all meant to be incremental. It's not meant to be anything that you can dump all the issues that are going on with whatever system you're dealing with and have it resolved. The best method is to come together every year, pick 2 or 3 issues that everybody rallies around, and just pound on those issues until they actually get done. And that, to me, has been the most effective way and the best way I think the social work community can have an impact on policy for not only their profession, but also for the clients they represent.
What advice would you give to social work students and professionals who have an interest in moving to macro social work?
I would say understand what influences macro social work as far as the policy development part of it. Understand who your representatives are, the different branches of government and how those operate, and who is representing those branches of government. I would dive really into the process. One of the things I learned in Olympia was that it really is about 51, 26, and 1. So 51 votes in the House, 26 votes in the Senate, and getting the governor to sign it. And if you can focus on that versus trying to get everybody to understand like where you're coming from or see the philosophy of it, about they may never get there. But if you can convince 26 people to vote for your issue and 51 people to vote for your issue and 1 governor to sign it, then you've done a significant job in making policy change. If you go in with just trying to philosophically get people to change their minds and their consciousness on how things, it's just too big. It's too big and it's too much of a struggle and it's not very realistic. But it's better to be strategic on behalf of your organization and on behalf of your clients to focus in on policies and work on understanding the process.
If you could tell your younger self some advice, what would that be and at what age?
My younger self, I would say probably, I always say read more. I always would love to read more. I would also tell my younger self to talk more to the folks who had been there before me, spend a lot more time with them, learn from them. There's so much knowledge that I feel like I bypassed, and most people bypass because you're young and you're like, I'm not gonna do it that way. That's the old way. That's kind of ridiculous. When I get there, it's gonna be blah, 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 blah. But in reality, there's so much knowledge and so much that you can learn from folks that have already paved the road beforehand. You don't have to use it all, but definitely there are some potholes and some landmines that you can avoid on the most part, and some things you can build off of based on their experiences. So I tell myself, just talk to more to the people before me a lot more, and take it to heart.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you would like to add to help future social workers who intend to work towards macro practice?
I always want to leave social workers with the message of their power. I think that social workers, I don't think they realize how much power and influence they actually have access to, because of typically they're working with folks that don't always appreciate them or even pay them as much as they feel like they're worth to be paid and even acknowledged as an organization. But I want social workers to really understand that you have more skill set, you have more knowledge than most policymakers, most folks in the world. And if you can unify that and you can concentrate that on a consistent basis, you can have a huge impact on the world.
What is your future after this chapter?
So I am now moved on to be the Vice President of Government Relations for the Seattle Kraken hockey team. I grew up a hockey fan. I've never skated before in my life, but because I grew up in South Central LA, I was raised right down the street from the LA Forum, which is where the LA Kings played as a kid. And so I'd always try to, pull together some money and go and watch hockey games and basketball games and baseball games. So I've been fortunate enough to be on the Kraken leadership team. And so I plan to do this and just enjoy it, working behind the scenes in sports. I've never worked in sports before. one of the reasons why I left the legislature was because I see my life in chapters, and I've had a chapter as a politician. I've had a chapter in the corporate world. I've had a chapter in the public world, in the public sector as an employee, and I wanted to have another chapter to experience life in a different way and experience a profession and use my skills in different ways. So anyway, Seattle Kraken hockey. If you don't know about it, learn about it. If you're not a hockey fan, be a hockey fan. If you are a hockey fan, I can't wait to see you.
Awesome. So we're coming at the end of the interview. I just want to say that it does take a true leader to do the right thing. And it looks like you have demonstrated that with your past, and then with your future. Seems like you're pushing through and setting more goals for yourself, even at an older age.
Well, one of the things I've learned is that never stop learning. Never stop. Never believe that you have ended your education, road. It's always something that you can learn.
Eric, thank you so much for this interview. I appreciate your time. Nichelle?
Thank you, Eric, so much. I hope that our members and our viewers can take what you have shared with us today and use it to advocate for themselves and for our clients that we serve. Thank you for watching our interview with Eric Pettigrew, and thank you, Ernesto, for leading our interview.